Hello, great to see you all again. Now, as you possibly know, I've been out a lot recently shooting tracked Nightscape images with my hydrogen alpha modified camera. And a lot of you have been asking me, well, how do I edit these images into the final photograph? So I'll be going through that in this video. Now, I would like to remind you that I have a pretty comprehensive library of editing and instructional videos already available here on my channel. Now, I made the decision probably about, I don't know, 2 years ago that all of my work would be available to everybody here on YouTube completely free of charge. In fact, the only things I actually charge for are my on-location photography workshops out on the farm and my calendars and prints, which are available through my website. But everything else is offered here on YouTube for everybody. Now, many of you have supported my work through the PayPal links attached, and for that, I am eternally grateful. It actually was a pretty difficult decision and a radical decision to not offer paid online courses, but I'm still feeling it's the right thing for me to do. Now, having said that, if you want to contribute financially to my work, I'm always grateful, but I always want my work to be available to anyone who needs some inspiration or instruction, regardless of their ability to pay for it. I will add some links to my material in the section below this video. Okay, well, let's get into it. I want to run you through how I edited one of my recent tracked and blended Nightscape images. Let's go. Okay, well, to start us off, I want to show you the completed image of one of the ones I want to look at today. And it's the beautiful Southern Cross in the southern sky, Coalsack Nebula, Eta Carina Nebula up here. It's absolutely gorgeous. And there's tree in the foreground. And as we zoom in, you can see there's some wonderful detail in this image. So as I mentioned in my video when I was out in the field, this is a combination of 20 tracked background sky images and a few, I think half a dozen perhaps, images of the foreground stacked just to get a little bit of cleaner image on that tree. And you can see the tree's only lit, and the grass here is only lit by the setting crescent moon. And I was pretty happy with that. So what I want to do is go into the software that I'm using. So I'm basically using Lightroom, Sequator to do the stacking, and Photoshop to doing the more complex editing and the blending of the images. So to start off, here I am in Lightroom, and you can see down here are my 20 frames. Now I've only done, well, as you can see, pretty much no editing on these at all. That's just how they came out of the camera. So what I've done here is selected all of these images, I've synced them together already, and I'm going to go to File, Export, and I'm going to be sending those off to Sequator. This is just a standard Lightroom as TIFF files. So TIFF files. Now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do that again because I've already done it. So what I'll be doing here is I'm going over to Sequator, which is a free program for Windows users. If you're a Mac user, you can use Starry Landscape Stacker, which is just as good as this, but not free. So when I get into Sequator, I double click on Star Images, and then I go to the folder where they are located, and you can see them here. You'll see a number of other images here because I've already edited this picture a few times. You can see them here. And there's also some dark frames. You'll see these black ones. And I took those simply with the lens cap applied to the camera. So it's taking the exact same shot, but they're called dark frames. And the idea of those is to remove noise from the images. I was a little bit concerned about the noise generated because it was a pretty hot night. So to make this work, I just select the images. Now, I've noticed here, just so you can see this one and this one, I've got the dark frame across the top there. For some reason, they didn't work properly. I'm going to deselect those because I don't know why. I could go back and do them again, but I just can't be bothered right now. As you can see, I've got them selected there, and it's just picked one frame out. Now, if I want to add those black frames into Sequator, I click on Noise Images. You can see it down here, Noise Images. So I'll double click that and go back to that file and find the 10 black frames. There we go, all 10 of those selected. I press open, and they are there. And the other thing you have to do here is select where you want the output files to go. So I want them to go back here, so I'm going to call that Sequator, Southern Cross, 50mm TIFF or whatever. It doesn't really matter what you call it. Click on save. Now all I need to do is click down here on composition stars, align stars. I will click select best pixels, slide that right across there like so. Now I'm not going to select any of these other things like freezing ground or anything because there's no ground in the shot to freeze. So I don't need to do anything here further. By the way, all of these are off. You'll notice I've got everything off in these other parameters. I don't need any of those. All I do now is click start. Now I'm not going to do it again because I've already done this a couple of times. It only takes a couple of minutes to go through. When it's completed, I go back to my folder and it will have, here we go, you can see it here. It's got an image called Sequator Southern Cross 50mm as I named it. All that is all of these images stacked together to come out as one TIFF file. All right, so now I'm going to go back to Lightroom. Now my requirement here is to end up with an image that I can blend back in. Now there's a number of ways that you can do this, but what I'm going to do is a very simple way. I'm just going to select one of those images, right click on it. These, by the way, these are the raw files. This is not the stacked file. This is just one of those raw files. I'm going to go to edit in Photoshop, and we're just going to wait. So here we are in Photoshop, and you can see that this document is opened here as a background layer. Now, I'm not going to be using this. It's just a reference, really. I'm going to be opening that TIFF file I created a minute ago in Sequator. So to do that, I go up to File, Open, click on the file, TIFF file, and open it. And you'll see that will come in its own separate little window. So I want to copy and paste that into the other document. So Control A to select it, Control C to copy, and Control V to paste. And if you're worried about those shortcuts, just go up to Edit, and it's got copy and paste, and you go to Select here, Select All to select the image. Okay, so now we have that image. I don't want to use that original file. It's just there as a reference. I'm going to delete that, but I'm going to be calling this one Sequator Original. I like to keep the file names in order because otherwise we can get out of hand and not be sure exactly what we're up to. The other thing I want to do is keep an original file so I can actually see what it looks like later on. I'm going to copy that, so I'm going to go to Layer, Duplicate Layer, and there you have a copy of that same file, which is the one I'm going to start working on. Now I want to introduce you to a couple of new steps that I'm using in some of these sky tracked images. And I'm using some action sets, which I bought, not very expensive, only about $10 or so, from a place called Photokemi Star Tools. So to access those, I can show you their website here, which you can see on screen, and they've got some really valuable tools. Now, to access those, I go up to Window and click Actions, and you'll see the action sets come down here into this separate window. And you can see there's a few different ones I've got here, but anyway, Photokemi Star Tools, that one there, and there's a number of action sets in here. Now an action is simply a collection of steps that is automated. If I want to do some levels adjustments and things like that, I can just go here to the one that says level stretch, click on that, click the start arrow down the bottom here, and it will then ask me to do a few things. So I'm going to do that. Set the gray point. And the gray point is listed here on this little graph, which is this point right there. So I'm going to put it to about there, just at the start of that little mountain. Click OK. It's asking me now to set the black point. So we'll do exactly the same thing. I'll drag this one on the right, on the left-hand side, right back to here at the beginning of that mountain. This is what levels adjustment looks like. Set the white point. So I'll continue with that. The white point is right over here on the far right. I'm going to push it right across there. Click OK. So it's asking me to do this a couple of times, so I'm just going to do that. Just following instructions. Set the black point, push it back over here to about there, and click OK. And well, that's what it did. So we've got that new layer there, which is just a little bit of an adjustment, not very much at all. But you know, the other thing I love about these action packs is that it gives you it basically duplicates it. It doesn't overwrite the layer you've just come from. So they're all going to be there in sequence, one on top of the other. And I actually really like that about these actions. Now, I want to introduce you to another thing that has been introduced, and that is a program called, well, it's basically a plug-in to Photoshop called StarXterminator. It's by Russell Croman, and this actually separates the stars from the nebulosity in the background, typically used in deep sky astrophotography. I'm going to be using it here. I'm going to show you what it does. I'm going to show you the reasons why I use it in a moment. You certainly don't have to use that. In fact, you don't have to use any of these actions I'm showing you either. You can just do this in the standard adjustment in Photoshop using curves and levels. But I'm going to show it to you because I really like what it does. I might just do a curves adjustment, and you'll see this little curves window come up. So I'm going to do just a little bit of a curve here, just to give us a little bit of contrast. The other thing I'm going to do is change the color. Now, there's a couple of different ways of changing color. Remember, this is an astro modified camera, so the colors are all a little bit different to what is normal. I'm going to go in here where it says RGB and go down to the color channels. You can see red. And what I'm going to do is decrease that red just a fraction, which I've done there. See, I've inputted 1 here. I've dragged that little slider across just 1 step. Then I'm going to go to the green. I'm going to actually click it about there, and I'm going to push it up just a tiny bit to about there. And I'm going to do the same with the blue channel. So you can see the information that's contained in these different colors, RGB, red, green, and blue. So if I take that off there, you can see what I've done. I've actually done a bit of a curves adjustment, but I've also adjusted the color just fractionally. And if I want to edit that again, I can just double click that and make my adjustments, which I will do because I don't want too much adjustment just at this moment in time. So it's a little bit blue. Maybe I'll just add a fraction more red back into this. So by clicking on that red, I can go up and put a little bit more red into that. See, if I go too far, see what happens? So I go back down and I'm dragging that down to about there. Okay, that's not too bad. Now what I want to do is actually merge that with that layer. And to do that, there's a number of ways, but what I'm going to do is go up to, and by the way, I'm making sure these other 2 layers here are not selected. I'm going to go up to Layer, Merge Visible. So that merges the visible layers into one layer. I'm going to do that a few times here, but for the moment, I'm just going to work in this particular layer. Now, what I want to do is separate the stars from the nebulosity. I'm going to talk to you about why I do that as we go along, but the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the layer so that I've got one to fall back on in case I make a mistake. I'm going to call this Starless, and you'll see why in a minute because I'm going to take the stars out of it. To do that, I'm going to click on Filter and go down to RC Astro, plug into Photoshop called StarXterminator. It's from the same place you get Gradient Exterminator, and some of you may have heard of that. I'm going to click on StarXterminator, and all I have to do, no parameters, I just click OK. And it takes just a little while to do its work, and you can see it going through here, maybe a few minutes depending on the complexity of the image. So let's just wait for that to do its thing. Okay, so here you can see what we've ended up with. Compared to where we came from, there's the image with all the stars, and there's the one with just the nebulosity in the background. Now, if we go in really close, you can see where the stars came from. These little dots, so there's little patches. So if I put the stars back in, you can see that's where the stars came from. Okay, now one of the issues that you face when doing star reduction or star minimization in Photoshop is you get artifacts, and if you're not careful, you can get a lot of these little terrible little artifacts when working with certain adjustments in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do here is do some edits to this layer separately to the stars. Now, for that to work, I need a star layer on its own. So what I'm going to do here is create another layer that just has stars. So I'm going to go back to this layer here called curves, which is the one we adjusted before. I'm going to create a new layer or duplicate that layer, and I'm going to call this one stars only and click OK. It's not stars yet, as you can see, it's just an original layer. But what I'm going to do is click on that layer, go up to image, come down to apply image, and then you'll see this little dialog box come up. I'm going to click on the layer that says merged at the moment. I'm going to click on that and the one that says starless, which we've just created. Then I'm going to go down to blending mode down here, which is currently on multiply. I'm going to click on that and go down to subtract. And these parameters here, 100% opacity, scale 1, offset 2, I'm just going to leave them where they are and click OK. And now what we have, if I turn that one off, is just a layer of stars only. That's pretty nifty, isn't it? The nebula's gone. There's just stars. Now, why did I go to all that trouble? I've got an image with just nebula and an image with just stars. Well, the answer is pretty obvious, really. I can actually edit both of those separately and do what I want to with either of those layers without affecting the other layer. So, in practice, what does that mean? Well, first thing first, I showed you those artifacts on this layer here, and they're not too bad to be honest, but if I zoom in close, you'll see them. And they're pretty awful. So I've got to be careful. I don't want to take too many stars out because I will be left with those little purple and orangey coloured blobs. But at the same time, you can look in this layer, there's quite a bit of noise in there. When I zoom in really close, if I'm back out, you don't see it too much. So what I'm going to do is create another layer, duplicate that layer, and I'm going to call that starless noise reduction. Again, I re-emphasize, naming these layers helps a lot later on, because if these are just all called the same layer, I've got no idea what I'm doing and I can get into a little bit of trouble there. So what I'm going to do here is essentially, I am going to put noise reduction on that layer that I just worked on. So to do that, I'm simply going to go up to Filter, Camera Raw, Filter, built into Photoshop, and you can see it coming up here. I'm going to go into the Detail tab and add about 50% of noise reduction, and also color noise reduction. About 50%, thereabouts. I'm not being too fussy. And I'm then going to click OK. So what's the difference between these two layers? Well, let's just zoom in, I'll show you. So this one is there and the other one is there. So you can see the difference in noise. Now I know on YouTube it's hard sometimes to see differences when people do this. So I'm trying to find an area that's quite noisy and show you the difference. That's without and that's with. So you can see that's a lot cleaner. But as you well know, when you do that, you lose detail. So up here in the nebula, if I look at the original and then the noise reduced one, I've lost a little bit of detail. And these nebulas, this Carina Nebula is one of the ones I want to feature again down here. It's always a little bit of a compromise. So what I'm going to do is add onto that noise reduced layer a layer mask. And you know what I'm going to do now. A layer mask is simply a way of rubbing out bits of the image. So I'm going to go over here to my brush tool, click on a small size brush, soft brush, to about that size, roughly. Let's go down to about I don't know, 30% opacity, thereabouts. I'm going to zoom in on those nebulas up here on the layer mask, brush it out a little bit. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm cutting a hole in this top layer so I can see what's underneath it. So you can see there what I've done, brought out more detail from that original layer without adjusting all the rest of it. I'm going to do the same down here, and I'll do this anywhere in this image where I think it needs to be nice and sharp. But you know, nebulosity isn't sharp. It's like clouds and dust and things like that. It doesn't particularly have a whole lot of clarity in it. Some of these bits here maybe, just a bit. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference. So I like it. I particularly want to bring these areas here out. So I'm just going over them. But where the noise is hiding is generally in all of this background stuff. And I'm going to do a little bit more in a minute. So you'll see one other option you can do just to blend it in a bit better is go down to about 11%. Let's just do that and just go over the whole thing. So now you can see what I've done here on my layer mask. I've just worked on this area mainly. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is duplicate layer. So this is my original starless image. I'm just going to keep that because I don't want to lose it, but I'm going to merge these two. I'm going to do that is just so I'm saving on all these extra layers and it's easier for me to build it. So I'm going to go up here to layer, merge visible, and that will merge those two visible layers into one. So now I've just got that one, which I've done a bit of noise reduction on. Okay, so what else am I going to do to this image? Well, there's a number of things I can do to it. I don't want to be too radical with it, but I want to bring out a bit more detail. So let's just have a look and see what we can do. So I think the first thing I might do is just do a curves adjustment layer. So let's just go down here to adjustment layer, curves, and once again I'm going to do a little bit of a what they call an S curve, and you can see it here. Now what this will do, by pushing up here in this shadow and highlights areas, I'm actually increasing which is effectively light pollution down the bottom here. I'll have a look at that in a minute. First things first, let's just see what I can do here. I'm trying to get some nice little bit of contrast in this image. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my red, green and blue channels and just see what happens if I move that around a fraction. Yeah, you see the color changes just by moving the different colors, and I'm up here in about the mid-tones. But one thing I will do is go into this here and actually decrease the amount that I did here by adjusting or brushing over on that layer mask. So to do that, go to about 11% up here, big brush, which I've got here, and I'm just going to brush out some of what I did down the bottom here because I don't want it to be too radical on that light pollution. I want to make sure that it's still there. Now some of you are probably saying, well, why are you leaving that light pollution in? Well, you know, this is going to blend into the foreground subject, and I want to make sure that it looks realistic. I don't want it to be completely black or dark because this is just above the horizon. And I think it will blend better if I do it that way. Remember, as you do more processes on an image, you can add more noise. So I'm always careful to look at it and make sure I haven't done that too badly. So it looks pretty good. Now, one thing I might do at this point in time, camera raw filter, go to the basic tab. I think I might just add a little bit more yellow or orange into this, and maybe just a bit of dehaze. Dehaze will add blue into the image if I'm not careful, so I've got to be careful with that. That's why I'm adding a bit more of the orange. All right, so I'm just going to leave that nebulosity part of the image there, and I'm going to go back to my stars. Now, what am I going to do with these stars? The first thing I really want to do is reduce them. There's just too many of them. And you would have heard of star reduction. I want to get rid of some of this stuff here. So what I'm going to do there is go up to my action pack, because there are star reduction algorithms built in here. Star reduction extra 1, it's called. So I'm just going to click on that. Let it do its thing. It goes through a number of steps, so we'll just wait and see what it comes up with. Okay, so you can see it here. It's done its thing. It's reduced the amount of stars. So it's taken out quite a lot of stars. Now, is that good or not? Well, I won't know until I try and put it back in with the other layer. So what I'm going to do, let's have a look at that right now. I'm going to put it to the top of the stack. Then I'm going to enable our nebulosity, but we can't see the nebulosity yet, so we have to apply a blend mode to our star layer. So I'm going to go here where it says normal, click down to linear dodge, add, and there we go. You now see that I've got my stars back in over the top of my nebulosity, but there's not as many stars. I've actually done star reduction. Now let's zoom in and have a look and see what it looks like. It's pretty good. There's not much in the way of artifacts there. I like it. Blends off nicely up the top of the image there. Pretty stellar, actually. There's the Southern Cross. So there's Alpha and Beta Centauri here, and the Southern Cross here, Coalsack Nebula there. I actually really like it. Now, I haven't done a whole lot to this image. It's not radical, and that's one of the things that I wanted to show you. I could go overboard, and possibly in some of the images that I've showed you already, I've edited this differently, and that's one of the magic parts of editing. You can do it differently each time. Now, I'll tell you, there's a couple of things I want to do to this image before anything. So one thing I will be doing here is merging these two together. So I'm going to do the same that I did a minute ago. I'm going to click on layer, merge visible. And now that is one layer again. The stars and the nebula are back attached to each other. One more thing I'm going to do is duplicate the layer. And I'm going to call this Star Glow. There's a lot of filters on the market that makes the stars glow so that you can actually see the main stars. Now I can see them quite okay there. I want to make them glow a little bit. Now some of you are going to laugh at me when I do this because it's as basic as, bear with me, and let's just see what we can come up with. Now one of the things I want to highlight and bring to your attention here is that these stars are different colors. You can quite clearly see that there's much more yellow and these are white. There's a bit of blue in that one. You come down here, definitely more yellow and more white or blue in this one. So what I want to do is make those stars appear bigger. And this is what all these star glow filters simply do. They actually add fog to the image. Now the problem with the star glow filter is that it adds fog to the whole image, not just the stars. And I don't particularly like that, but what I do like is the effect that you get. It's a bit like when you've got thin layer of cloud, it bloats the stars and makes them bigger. We can do that manually. I'm just going to simply grab a paintbrush tool. Remember, this is on the Star Glow layer. So I've duplicated the layer. I'm going to make my brush soft and about 34%. And what I'm going to do is select a color. So I go down here to my color patch, click on it, and it comes up with a little selector. I'm going to click on that there, and you see it picks the color of that star, which is about there. It's in that bit of orange part of the thing, and I'm just going to simply click on it and see how that's now making it glow. If I go a little bit less opacity and perhaps a fraction more in size, it just goes a bit bigger and a bit more intense. But I haven't changed anything except the fact that it looks like it's glowing. I'm going to do the same thing here on this one, and you'll see this is a different color. Notice how the color changes. Perfect. And this is also a little bit smaller star, so I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, just so it keeps it a little bit more in keeping with the originality of how they look in the sky. Do the same thing here. Color picker. This is a very much a yellowy orange color, so I'm going to click on that one and go again. Just dab it in. Keep the center of the star hot like that, which is what I want. I'm just adding star glow. That's all I'm doing. Nothing radical about this at all. Well, I don't do it very often, to be honest. But I'm doing it here now just so we can see what it looks like. So what I've done here, just to recap, I've separated the nebulosity from the stars. I've reduced the stars in size, so they're not as big as, there's not as many stars as there were. But what I've done by doing that, by separating the stars, I've actually reduced the amount of noise and terrible artifacts that you often get by doing a star reduction. This is a pretty clean image when you go in nice and tight. Which is what I'm after. I don't want to be too radical about this. All right, so this layer here, if I turn it on and off, you can see it's a star glow. I've actually added in star glow. And I actually really like what I've done to this image. So what I'm going to do now is merge visible on that. I'm going to layer, merge visible, and now they are not separate anymore. That's one layer. So I've actually gone from the original image, which is that one, to that, just by editing the steps that I've just showed you. What I'm going to do now, flatten the layers. So I'm going to go to layer, flatten image. So I've now only got one layer, and I do this because it's a massive Photoshop file size otherwise. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to click out of Photoshop now and go back to Lightroom. So let's do that. All right, well, here we are back in Lightroom. You can see what it looks like full screen. Not too bad at all, but I don't think I'm quite finished yet, because I like to use some of the tools in Lightroom better than some of the tools in Photoshop. And you might laugh and say, well, what's going on with that? But that's just how I am. And so what I'm going to do is go up here into the masking, click on that mask, and I'm going to go to the brush tool. And what I'm going to do here is layer in some dehaze and some exposure, because dehaze will darken it. It will also make it bluer. So what I'm going to do is simply just rub it on as a brush. Now the reason I'm selecting it there and not heavily selecting it down the bottom is because I don't want to add too much to that glow down the bottom. But I do want to make sure I've got something to play with here. Let's just see the before and after. So I've just made it a little more standout-ish. It has changed the color, and this is one of the things to be aware of, but it's brought a bit more of that magenta in. But I can actually go back up here into my global settings and perhaps drop a little bit of that magenta out. yeah, it's just a bit brighter than what it was. And that's what I wanted to do here. I could have done it back in Photoshop, but I've done it here. Again, this is a pretty rough edit because there's a lot of things that I can do here, which I haven't got time to show you because this video will go on forever if I do. Okay, so coming over to this image here of the tree. Now you can see that I took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I took 6 images of the tree. And what I did, I'm not going to go through it now because it will just waste our time, but I basically stacked 6 together. And the reason I did that was for noise reduction. It was a bit dirty and noisy in this foreground. I could have got away with 1 image, but I used 6 images. And that's okay, that's just what I did. So here we have one of those images. I'm just going to right click on that and click edit in Adobe Photoshop. I'm going to be editing this image and I'm going to be replacing the sky, which I just showed you the editing of the sky portion. There's a number of ways that you can replace a sky. Here we are in Photoshop. To save time, I've already brought in that Sequator layer here that we stacked. I didn't have time to show you that, but it's the same sequence of events that I was doing before. So I'm going to get rid of that background layer because I don't need that anymore. Now, what I want to do is simply put our sky that we just created in on top of that. I'm going to go up to Edit, Sky Replacement. And what it's going to do is replace the sky with whichever sky, there it is, I last used. Now you can see that's not the sky I'm using here, but because that's one of the images I've been working on, separate to this project, that comes up with that as a default in the background. It doesn't matter, it just goes to the last one you used. Looks all right, but I'm not going to use that. I'm going to click down here and the little plus arrow and add in, and it's going to ask me where I want to get my sky from. And now that will populate into this here. Now there's a whole heap of skies that Photoshop applies here as standard templates. I have never used any of those. I only ever use my own work for my own purposes. And here we go. I've just clicked on, that is the one that we just worked on. And boy, oh boy, doesn't that look awesome just straight out of the box. I've done virtually nothing on that so far as adjustments, and it just looks spectacular. I'm just going to zoom in a bit closer so we can have a good look at it and make sure. So I click on, before I click OK down here, these are the parameters I can adjust. And I think it's really important when you're using this program, this part of Photoshop, that you don't just willy-nilly click on OK and not shift anything around here, because sometimes you need to. I'm going to click on the magnifying glass and go in close to the tree just by clicking. Oh, now you can see how well that has selected that tree. Can you imagine how much time that would take? Boy, oh boy, that's good. Now I have to tell you, it doesn't always work that well, but in this particular case, it looks stellar. This program is very, very good. It's AI technology and it is fantastic. Now, as far as this shift edge, if I move that, it's on 0 at the moment because that's where Photoshop has calculated that it should be for best results, and I can't argue with that. It looks fantastic. But if I do shift it, you can see it will actually change the mask around the tree. And it'll go one way or the other. You can see how the tree's disappearing because it's adding too much of the background. So I'm going to put it back to 0 because that was pretty much perfect. That is phenomenal. And the blend looks fantastic. Now, a couple of things you can do. You can adjust the sky brightness if you want to, like that. I don't really think it needs to be. I can adjust the color temperature if I wish, as you can see, which again, I can't see any reason why I'd want to do that. So I'm just going to leave it where it was. And I can scale the background a bit just to make it fit a little bit better. But this is just straight out of the box. I haven't done anything. You can see how it looks. I'm going to press OK. And here you have all of these layers that has been automatically generated by Photoshop using the sky replacement algorithms. Click on Layer, Flatten Image. Now everything goes back to one layer, as you can see there. And now I'm going to cross out of Photoshop. It took me, all of 5 or 6 minutes just to replace the sky, my sky. I'm not replacing it with any other scene that wasn't there. This is exactly the scene that I was confronted with. That is a beautiful image and I absolutely love it. All right, so just as a bonus for you guys, because that was a really easy one, I'm going to show you this. This was taken on the same night. You remember my previous video. So I'm going to do a sky replacement in this windmill, which is more difficult. So I'm going to right click, edit in, open in Photoshop, and we'll continue when we get to Photoshop. Okay, once again, just to save time, I've brought in that TIFF file into Photoshop. You can see it here. This is the windmill. And I want to put that same sky over the top. So let's go to Edit, Sky Replacement, and here we have the box come up and see what it does this time. Okay, so here we have our first problem. You can see what's happened here. It's done a pretty good job down here and through here, but not very good there where the windmill is. So let's just zoom in, have a good look, and see what's going on here. Now the windmill's spinning, and because of that, it's half transparent anyway. But apart from that, gee, that's actually pretty good. Look at that. It's done a great job down here and along the fence. That is really nice. So what we're going to do is try and work out how we can fix this up. Thankfully, it's not that hard to do. So up here, I'm going to click on this little brush tool here and go up here to my brushes. So what I'm going to do is just go over the top of this, and it's at 50% opacity, remember. So what I might actually do, just to make this work a bit quicker, let's go to 100%, see what happens. Got to be careful here at 100%, but I essentially want to be able to see the windmill. I'm not actually painting anything in. This is there. I'm just revealing it. And remember, whenever you take a photograph of a spinning windmill, you can see stars through it. So that's what we're looking at here. I'm not adding anything. I'm just actually putting back in what the program thought shouldn't be there. The program is blending the foreground and the background together. And to do that, it has to make some transparency decisions. It has to work out where the join should be. It's an old, broken down old windmill. You don't expect it to be perfect. And by the way, if you want to, you can zoom in a bit. This window's still open, remember. I haven't pressed OK here. I'm way down to pixel level here, so you're not going to get much better than this. Remember, I want to reiterate, you can see stars through windmills when they're spinning. So these stars are meant to be there. And there we have it. We can see now that we've got our foregrounds, backgrounds. Okay, so here we are back in Lightroom, full screen. There's our windmill. Doesn't it look fantastic? Absolutely love this image, and I love all of these images, and I hope you enjoyed seeing how I made them. Right, well there you have it. One thing I can guarantee you of is that these techniques are quickly evolving. New software and ideas are coming along all the time, all of which are making the post-processing of these images a lot easier. So thanks once again for following my work here on the channel. And I'd love you to like this video and perhaps even consider subscribing if you're not already. I'm always happy to chat down below in the comments section. Let me know what editing techniques you're using for your nightscapes. I'm always actually interested to hear what you guys are getting up to. So until I see you again, you have a fantastic week. I'll see you soon.